London, January 1820. The mud of St. Giles is no mere wet earth. It is an acidic molasses of cold and misery that seeps into the souls of those without a title to keep them afloat. Thomas watches from the shadows of an alley as the metallic scent of blood clashes with the stench of cheap gin wafting from the taverns, a cocktail our ministers prefer to omit from their banquet menus. A few yards away, the body of Rene G. lies like a bundle of soiled rags. An officer of the lifeguards, his scarlet tunic appearing a funeral black under the dim light, wipes his saber with the phlegm of a man who has just dispatched a tedious bit of bureaucracy. The click of the blade returning to its scabbard is the only sentence passed tonight. Swift, final, and without right of appeal. "She moved with ill intent, Sergeant." The officer's voice is flat, devoid of the remorse usually reserved for human beings. "Indeed, sir, a clear threat to the security of the Crown," the subordinate replies, kicking aside a bunch of crushed violets. "Behold the most dangerous corpus delicti, flowers. It seems that in the England of the Lance, even the scent of spring has become a subversive act." The clatter of a carriage breaks the spell. It is a vehicle of an extravagant orange, trimmed with gold, a mobile insult hurled into the face of the surrounding squalor. From the slit of the window appears Lady Demona P. Lant. Her face, illuminated by an internal candle, bears a sneer of disgust, as if poverty were a contagious airborne disease. "Cocher, why have we stopped in this cesspool?" she shrieks, her voice so shrill it would make court violins pale. "An accident, my lady. A woman, dead," the coachman replies. Lady Demona covers her nose with an amber and lavender handkerchief, the official scent of perfumed tyranny. "Dead? What nonsense! She simply chose a ghastly place to draw attention to herself." Then, catching Thomas's eye, she adds with the haughty condescension of one who confuses wealth with morality, "These losers make the city so aesthetically displeasing. Have this cleared by morning. I have a ball to prepare for." Thomas retreats to the back of the printing shop, where the air tastes of linseed oil, turpentine, and that paper dust that clings to you like guilt. Costantina awaits him, her back straight, her ashwood cane tapping a metronome of pain upon the floor. "You smell of mud and horses," she pronounces. "I saw Lady Demona. She spoke of losers, Costantina, as if a woman's life were a mere typo in a court ledger." Costantina doesn't flinch. She twirls her cane and points to the press. "Then write, use the gull of Lady Minnea of Polis." Thomas sits at the desk. Every word etched onto the plate is a surgical operation, a way to force the world to look at the wound without the filters of silk.
Lady Minnea's Gazette, London, 30th January 1820. My dear readers, while your primary concerns involve the correct shade of indigo for the upcoming ball, allow me to inform you that Operation Iron Hand has just added a new color to the city's palette, the blood red of the proletariat. It appears our esteemed Lady Demona P. Lant found it extremely inconvenient that the lower classes have a tendency to expire directly beneath the wheels of her carriage, a most vulgar habit, you will agree, to interrupt the transit of a noblewoman with one's own death. Lady Demona assures us this is the price for making London great again, a statement that shines with intellectual honesty if one considers that her idea of greatness coincides curiously with the number of acres she manages to seize from public lands for her private gardens. The ministry claims Rene G. was a threat, a flower girl armed with wilted daisies. If this is the danger that justifies a cavalry charge, then I tremble to think what shall happen when the mob decides to arm itself with something more solid than their own broken dreams. Yours always, Lady Minnea of Polis.
The thought of the malicious hooves faded. swallowed by the mud that devours all. But the silence that followed was worse. An electric anticipation, the kind that precedes tempests or raids. Thomas felt cold sweat trickling down his back, mingling with the fairest scent of fresh ink. He knew every minute spent in that basement shortened the distance between his neck and the hangman's noose. "The paper is ready," Constantina announced. It wasn't an invitation. It was the order of a general counting ammunition before the assault. The clack-clack of her cane stopped beside the stack of grayish sheets, paper so poor it seemed made of dust and rags. It's Fleet Street scrap, the worst on the market, but it has one unbeatable virtue. It leaves no trail, Thomas replied. His fingers, blackened by lead, arranged the movable type with surgical precision. Every letter was a metal tooth ready to bite into Lady Damona's immaculate reputation. "Do you think they'll truly read it?" Thomas asked. There was still a flicker of that idealism Constantina sought to uproot with strokes of cynicism. "The lords will read it to mock their rivals, the debutantes to learn insolence, and the ministry to decide whom to hang," she retorted without looking away from the barred door. Never underestimate the power of well-packaged gossip, Thomas. It is the only thing that travels faster than the lifeguard's bullets. Thomas pulled the lever of the press. The groan of wood and metal seemed to scream Renee G's name into the London underworld. As the sheets piled up, the news of young Alex P's killing took shape, dismantling piece by piece the fable of danger constructed by the palaces of power.
Lady Minnea's Gazette, London, 30th January 1820, extraordinary edition. My dear readers, while you are busy deciding if Brussels lace matches Chinese silk for tonight's dinner, allow me to update you on the latest gift the Home Office has delivered to poor Alex P., a bayonet blade straight into the chest. Official dispatches describe him as a dangerous agitator. A fascinating reconstruction, were it not for the fact that the only weapon found in his possession was a vial of laudanum intended for the wounded of St. Giles. But then, in Lady Damona P. Lance's gilded universe, possessing antiseptic cotton without noble authorization is clearly an act of high treason. Lady Damona, between a sip of sherry and a quip about the shoddy quality of this year's beggars, continues to invoke public order. Yet the only order visible in these streets is the methodical one with which the gendarmes are filling mass graves. It seems Truth is the only uninvited guest at her banquets. Yours always, Lady Minnea of Polis.
"The boy died trying to tend to the people she ordered to be charged," Thomas murmured, staring at the still wet words. "Consistency is not a virtue of the powerful, Thomas," Constantina replied, seizing the first sheet. "Lady Damona does not see a man dying. She only sees a tiresome interruption in her triumphal march towards absolute power." A sharp blow to the upper door shook the ceiling. Lime dust fell upon the fresh sheets like dirty snow. "They are here," Constantina said. Her face betrayed no fear, only the resigned acceptance of one who knows history always demands a tribute. "Take the bags. If Lady Minnea ends up in Newgate tonight, the finale of this story will be much shorter than planned." Thomas tucked the bundles under his arm, feeling the warmth of the paper against his flank. He was no longer a mere printer. As the guards attempted to batter down the door, he understood the time of hiding was over. He turned towards the secondary exit, the one that led into the sewers. There, at least, the stench of injustice was honest. The air inside Carlton House was a programmed sensory assault. The sickly sweet scent of thousands of beeswax candles mingled with French musk and the pungent aroma of fresh pineapple, a trophy of luxury displayed with the grace of war booty. Thomas, compressed into a stolen waiter's livery that sawed into his armpits, felt the jarring friction between the cold silk of the uniform and the rough paper of the leaflets hidden against his skin. The ton moved with a studied slowness, a waltz of hypocrisy where every bow seemed to conceal a knife ready to strike. "Champagne, monsieur?" Thomas whispered, offering a glass to a florid baron who ignored him. At the center of the room loomed Lady Damona P. Lant, slothed in a dress of an orange so violent it seemed to devour every ray of light. She brandished a feathered fan like a scepter, the emblem of an empire built on the aesthetics of oppression. "My dear Regent," Lant exclaimed, her voice cutting the air like metal on glass, "I assure you the Westminster Wall is not merely a necessity, it is a work of art. It shall keep the rabble away from our eyes and, more importantly, our investments." Thomas approached the refreshment tables, and with a fluid motion born of necessity, slipped copies of the Gazette between the dance cards. "Your hands are shaking. Is it fever or a guilty conscience?" chilled the militia officer, the same one who, hours earlier, had scrubbed Renee's blood from the pavement. "Only fatigue, sir," Thomas replied, with a sharpened subtext that the soldier, blinded by his own sense of impunity, failed to grasp. Silence fell over the room when a young debutante reaching for her carnet lifted instead the clandestine sheet. The ink stain of truth spread across the Persian carpet of polite society.
Lady Minnea's Gazette, London, 31st January 1820. My dear readers, it is fascinating to note how the clinking of your crystal manages to perfectly drown out the sound of hammers erecting walls of separation. Lady Damona P. Lant proposes a wall to protect us, but this authoress asks, who shall protect Lady Damona from the debts incurred to pay for this magnificent gala, if not the funds diverted from the repairs of the very bridges you all cross? It seems London's greatness has a cost, and it is precisely the price of your blindness. While you dance, the ministry counts the corpses to ensure your silk is not stained by reality. It is a delightful dance, milady, but beware, even the sweetest music ends, and the silence that follows is often heavy with uncomfortable questions. Yours always, Lady Minnea of Polis.
Lady Damona snatched the sheet from the girl's hands, her face turning from the orange of her rouge to a ghostly white, before exploding into a purplish rage. "Find whoever brought this seditious libel, now," she shrieked, losing every shred of aristocratic decorum. Thomas, already slipped toward the kitchens, felt the scent of fear begin to overpower that of lavender. Lant's mask was not merely cracked, it had shattered. Stepping out into the freezing night, Thomas was no longer a mere infiltrator, but the chronicler of the imminent collapse of an entire system. Dawn over the Thames docks brought no light, only a lead-colored fog tasting of rotten fish and tar. The silence was unnatural. No screeching of pulleys, no cries of merchants. The Empire's ships bobbed inert, prisoners of a strike spreading with the speed of an inconvenient truth. Thomas watched the crowd, men with faces hollowed by hunger, clutching in their calloused hands not ropes, but crumpled copies of Lady Minnea's Gazette. "It's a total blockade, Thomas," Constantina murmured. The clack-clack of her cane on the wet stone pier rang out like a pistol shot in the void. "You've ceased to be a chronicler. Now you are their mirror." The balance was as taut as a violin string ready to snap. Thomas felt the weight of narrative responsibility. Every word engraved in the basement had driven these fathers of families to defy bayonets. Suddenly, a roll of drums pierced the fog. Lady Damona P. Lant appeared on a makeshift stage, escorted by a double line of dragoons, who seemed there more to protect her from reality than the people from disorder. She wore a fox fur cloak that oozed opulence, a visual insult amidst those rags. "You wretches!" Lant screamed, her voice distorted by a brass megaphone that rendered her as inhuman as her message. "Do you let yourselves be enchanted by a scrap of gray paper? Lady Minnea does not exist. She is an invention of failed Jacobins, of merchants of filth who hate your nation." A worker threw a bolt that splintered the wood of the stage. The soldiers leveled their muskets. The dialogue between power and people was officially dead, replaced by the metallic clatter of weapons being cocked. "The ministry has authorized me to declare this strike an act of sedition," she continued, her eyes rolling in the mystical fervor of propaganda. "I am building your security. I am making London great again, and you thank me with sabotage? You are nothing but losers." "It is we who pay for your marble, milady," Thomas shouted from the crowd. His voice emerged from the shadows, making an irreversible choice. Truth, to be believed, required a face. Lady Demona leaned forward, pinpointing the source of the disturbance with the look of one who has just found an insect in her sherry. "Arrest him! He is the pen that poisons your minds." As the gendarmes charged, Thomas tasted the bitter tang of gunpowder and the cold touch of mud. Constantina grabbed him by the jacket, dragging him away as the cries of the workers drowned out the roar of the rain. The smoke of the dockside revolt has not yet dissipated, but Lady Demona has already launched her counterattack. Unable to capture the ghost of Lady Minnea amidst the Thames mist, she has decided to give any face to the enemy. James and Sarah Miller, two poor bookbinders who had merely offered Thomas refuge during his flight, are dragged onto a makeshift stage before Newgate Prison. Heavy chains scrape against the wood, a sound that freezes the blood of the gathered crowd. "Behold your heroes!" Lady Demona cries, standing upon the scaffold like a goddess of vengeance in orange silk. "These two wretches are the hands that have soiled London's name. James and Sarah Miller are Lady Minnea. Their execution today shall end this madness." Thomas, hidden among the dispossessed, clenches his fists until blood trickles from his knuckles. He wants to scream, but Constantina holds him by the arm, her eyes fixed on the stage. "Not with force, Thomas. With the word. It is the only thing they cannot hang." The following day. The scaffold erected before Newgate is a wound of raw timber in the grey of London. Lady Demona P. Lant watches the crowd with a triumphant smile that illuminates her heavily painted face. Beside her, James and Sarah Miller tremble under the weight of their chains, accused of being the masterminds behind Lady Minnea. "London, behold the end of your false prophets!" Lant shrieks, her voice slicing through the icy air. "These two miserables have poisoned your minds. Today, their death shall restore decorum to the crown." Thomas is in the crowd, his hood pulled low, breath short. He does not step forward, he does not yell. He moves like a wraith among the desperate, distributing small rolls of paper that pass from hand to hand, as invisible as a contagion. Just as the executioner reaches for the lever, a cry rises from the back of the square. It is not a cry of rage, but of mockery. A worker holds up the sheet he just received, then another, then 100.
Lady Minnea's Gazette, Morning Edition. Innocence has no face. My dear readers, Lady Demona is attempting to offer you a puppet show. James and Sarah Miller are guilty only of binding the dreams of those who have no voice. While she points at these two innocents, I ask you, where has the gold gone that the ministry allocated for this winter's coal? Look at Lady Demona's new garden, and you shall find the answer. Milady, you may hang these poor bookbinders, but I am here, in the crowd, watching your failure. Lady Minnea has no neck for your noose. Release the Millers, or tomorrow the entire city shall know the name of your lover in the king's cabinet and the price you pay for your silence. The murmur of the crowd becomes a roar. The soldiers of the security cordons begin to fall back, struck not by stones, but by the weight of the truth they read upon the pages. The colonel of the dragoons approaches Lant, his face taut. Milady, the people know. If you spill this blood, Newgate will be razed to the ground before sunset. The ministry orders their immediate release.
"It is blackmail," she screams, but her voice rasps like rusted metal. Her authority has vanished. Under the pressure of the mass pressing against the barriers, the hangman is forced to remove the nooses. The Millers are pushed down from the stage into the arms of the crowd, which bellows the name of Lady Minnea. Lady Demona stands alone upon the scaffold. At that moment, a stone wrapped in a sheet falls at her feet. She picks it up with trembling fingers. There is no one before her, only a sea of anonymous, dirty faces. Thomas has already vanished into the alleys, a shadow among shadows. On the note, written with an elegance that burns her like fire, she reads, "You sought a face, milady, and found only the mirror of your own malice. The Millers are free, and I am still here, invisible and everywhere. This is not a goodbye, but a see you soon. I shall be the cold breath on your neck at every banquet, the ink stain on every one of your dirty contracts. The challenge has only just begun, and you are already short of breath." Lady Demona threads the paper, but the pieces escape her hands, fluttering into the mud of the scaffold. As her carriage is escorted away amidst jeers, Thomas watches from a distant rooftop. Lady Minnea has won again, and her secret is safer than ever.
Lady Minnea's final note. My dear readers, the curtain falls, not with applause, but with the sharp crack of a truth crashing onto a marble floor. Lady Demona has discovered at her own expense that boundary walls are useless if the enemy is already inside, one's own greed. Greatness is measured not in stone, but in justice, and justice, however slow and dressed in rags, has a scent that no lavender of Mayfair can ever mask. Yours always, Lady Minnea of Polis.